Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Text Messages The Resurrection. You're listening to the voice of Rick Tex, the parasite of Text Messages The Resurrection. We typically try to broadcast just about every night. And there's really no set schedule. I mean, we usually don't do 7 nights a week or 7 days, 7 mornings, 7 ways till Sunday to get back at somebody. So we just try to do the best we can with the resources we're provided and just put the hammer down. Yeah, yesterday, for example, it snowed. We had a sort of a blizzard on Saturday night. We had some snowing, a week prior. So it was quite a mess. Had to shovel a lot last night and even this morning a little bit too. So that's one of few other reasons why we didn't happen to broadcast yesterday. It is good to take a day off every once in a while. Because, it's one thing to just try to put out as much quantity as possible. But you also have to take quality into consideration as well. Oh yeah, but sometimes you don't really know what you really got until you put yourself to the test. So you might think that you've probably heard of the term overexerting your muscles or overtraining. Now, that could be true. But if you think about a lot of people who basically work blue collar jobs or dig ditches all day, and you work on an assembly line, they're working pretty much 8 hours a day, 5, sometimes 6, 7 days a week. And yeah, they might get vacation here and there, but they don't get as much vacation as, say, office workers or white collar jobs, whatever you want to call them. So the reality is, if you work out yourself every single day, there are artificial and synthetic ways to continue to build up your system to create the gains that are required after breaking down the muscle tissue and all the other cells too. Because, a lot of cells need to replicate or get broken down and need to replicate every time you work yourself. Not just strength training, just any kind of movement in general. Even thinking requires that. The brain requires an enormous amount of resources. Brain cells require about twice, for each cell, they require twice the resources as any other cell in the body. Now, the muscle cells are the biggest cells, but the brain cells are the ones that use up the most resources. That's one of the most profound differences between humans and basically many other creatures, is the size of their head relative to the rest of their body is a lot bigger. Now, a lot of that has to do with fine motor control movements too. Because if you look at a chicken just sort of, bounces around. It has jerky motion. Whereas a dog or a cat, they're very smooth and fluid, and they have a lot bigger brains. Now, yeah, a chicken is obviously smarter than both a cat and a dog, but it doesn't have the additional neurons for fine motor movement. All it does is run around and eat and sleep and lay down and fly 5 feet in the air or whatever. So that's usually the size of the brain. A lot of times intelligence is measured more by your cognitive ability based on fallacious IQ tests that are given to you. Somebody who can run fast, their brain is probably more complex in their motor neuron controls than somebody who can't run fast. So if measure of intelligence was based on that, they would be more intelligent than anybody else. But there's some stigma that's linked to athletic prowess, that somehow if you have a lot of athletic prowess, then your cognitive abilities are lacking, so you're not considered intelligent. But to be 100% honest, the greatest athletes are usually the ones who don't have to actually put thought into what they're doing. Their body just knows what to do. Sort of like people who know how to send and receive radio signals, ham radio operators. They just know what to do because they've done it enough times. They're skilled in the ways of their craft, and they're intellectually gifted in that facet of thought and imagination. So if somebody's good at basketball, that you could, most by and large they do have more muscle fibers, more muscle connections, more muscle cells, a greater ratio of muscle cells to fat cells. So in that regard, they're a lot more gifted than the average person. But on the same hand, they also need finer motor neuron controls, more motor neuron controls, and more resources for their brain to operate all those systems. From a brain expenditure standpoint, good athletes probably use more of their brain than people who sit around all day and don't really do much except maybe read books online or whatever the case may be. So the fact is, it is important to consider what intelligence actually is. Because I mean that this didn't really become apparent to me until I observed the actions of chickens and cats. Because it's like, okay, how is it that a chicken can make more distinct noises than a cat? So it has a higher level of communication, especially a more higher level of communication than a dog too. But why is it that their head is about the size of a pinky finger, or their brain is like the size of a kidney? And I mean, it's based on just controlling every single system and subsystem and sub to the subsystem in the bodies of these mammalian creatures, or fowl creatures in the case of birds. So yeah, I mean, if somebody tells you you're not intelligent or anything like that, you just have to consider the type of IQ testing that you're looking into. Now, yeah, it is important to recognize strengths and weaknesses. Like, for example, one of the reasons why we try to run as many shows as possible is that it helps us to better evaluate weaknesses and to sort of strengthen them. And if there are any strengths, which I haven't yet discovered, then we can sort of build on them as well. So over time, hopefully the strengths will manifest themselves or become more apparent and evident, and the weaknesses will become evanescent, and nobody will even be able to recognize them anymore. That's sort of the idea. I mean, it's always just improving whatever foundation you're building on. Now, it is important to recognize a good foundation too, because say, for example, if you want to be a football player, but you're not that big and you don't really run that fast and you're not very aware of your surroundings, you don't really have a very good foundation to build on. But if you are very good at putting together puzzles and you can snap together a puzzle in no time at all, you'd probably make a really good computer programmer because you have that foundation of knowledge. I mean that's kind of, now does that mean that should be a completely inhibiting factor to whether you would play football or not? Not really. I mean, maybe you could parlay those skills into some type of coaching endeavor or strategist or scouting, something. It's just finding your hobby, knowing your weaknesses, building on your strengths, combining them all to making yourself great again. Because if you enjoy what you're doing, people around you are going to enjoy what they're doing a little bit more. They're probably going to enjoy being around you, and it just builds everybody up. So I mean, that's usually the goal. If you're in an environment, everybody seems reasonably satisfied and content, nobody's ever going to be happy all the time, and you can't make them happy either. You can't even make yourself happy, so there's very little chance that you're going to make anybody else happy either. I mean, it's you try to not make them angry. That's one thing you can definitely do. But as far as your goals and your responsibilities, yeah, it's your goal is to make somebody happy. It's gonna be a pretty monumental task, and some people are out for it. Some people are willing to do that. I mean, for example, spouses, their whole objective is generally to make the other spouse happy, or at least satisfied or content with their existence. Yeah, it is a tall order, and a lot of times people quit and give up. Hence the divorce rate at whatever it is nowadays. But I mean, that's just reality of thinking the grass is greener on the other side, or not observing the natural progression of life. Because if you think about it, I mean, you're born, you're a kid till you're 12, 13 years old. Then you're a pre-adolescent, then you're an adolescent, then you're an adult, then you're at the point where you start having kids, then you're at the point where you start having more kids, and then you're a career person, and then you start to wind down your career, and then you start having grandkids, and then you start to do more leisurely things, and then you start to have great grandkids, and then you're at the point where you're just trying to stave off death and just enjoy what you can while you can. That's just the natural progression of life. Your dopamine and your endocrine systems are set up and designed to achieve an optimal existence following that natural course. A lot of us veer off that path, and some of us veer off it pretty significantly. But just inherently, we all have that innate knowledge that this is the path we need to be on. And a lot of people try to circumvent that by taking drugs and using drugs to mimic a lot of the dopamine that they're not gaining due to the veering off the course of what your life path is supposed to be. I mean, all we basically are creatures that perpetuate our existence. Really not a whole lot more or less to that. I mean, yeah, maybe there's a lot more, but we can't comprehend it. So we just live life, put in our best effort, and hope for the best. That's really all we can do. Yeah, we'll go through pain and suffering, but that ultimately builds character and hope. And nobody can ever avoid pain at all hours or all times of the day. So That being said, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to put a wrap on this show. We're glad that you could join us. We thank you. We appreciate your patronage. And we hope you will be able to make yourselves greater again due to the knowledge or at least the entertainment that you've garnered from us tonight. Thank you.